hold it a little far away. Hi guys, I am Tori Schwerner, one of the organizers here at OKC Design and Tech. Welcome. Thank you guys so much for coming to our September event. I'm really excited to, we're changing up the format a little bit and trying to get more things. We did a panel recently. We're going to have a dual talk coming up next month, and today we have an interview taking place. Before that, let me just dive into a couple of things, a couple of announcements. We want to say thank you to Techlahoma and Starspace for sponsoring us. That is why we have free, awesome lunch. That's why we have this beautiful space. Let's see what else is up here. We are streaming live on Twitch. That is why we use this microphone. I know we don't always need it and it can be aggressive, but we want to stream on Twitch so everyone can see, or if you guys miss it, feel free to check us out. If you guys want to be more involved with Techlahoma and or OKC Design and Tech, please feel free to reach out to any of the founders, or you can go on to Techlahoma and Slack and just start asking some questions. We're happy to help. We're happy to get you involved in any way that you want to be involved with, again, either Techlahoma or OKC Design and Tech. Also, so Starspace 46 offers a free co-working space on the day of our meetup. So if you guys want to take your laptops and go work and check out the space, feel free to go and do that. That's part of our deal with Starspace. So big thank you to them for supporting us in that way. And that's it for just quick announcements. We'll have a few more at the end, but I want to kick it off with one of our organizers, Gaia Boyd. She's going to come up and do a longer introduction of our guest today. But Gaia recently joined, and please come on up, and thank you so much. Yeah. There you go.
All right. Hi there, I'm Gaia Boyd. So glad to see you all here. Starting to see more familiar faces, people coming back, so that's really exciting. Welcome, welcome. I am here today with Brandie Moore, who I've had the honor of knowing for a couple years now. We've gotten to chit-chat, and as I was making my way into the UX community, Brandie was really, in Oklahoma City, Brandie was really welcoming and enthusiastic about having some more UXers here, because
Definitely.
She's been at American Fidelity for about
16 years.
16 years now, and she's been doing UX for close to 10.
Yes.
Right? So really leading the charge in Oklahoma business community for UX before we had many companies putting people in that role. She is a senior usability analyst, and she has really led the way with making usability and user experience a business priority. She is certified with Human Factors International, certified usability analyst, and a UX master consultant with the Nielsen Norman Group. So let's give Brandie a warm welcome.
Thank you all.
So glad she's here. Yeah. So Brandie, American Fidelity lead usability analyst. What does that mean? What do you do?
So we do kind of the whole gamut of UI, UX, usability. Our team leads our screen designs. We do our usability studies. We do journey mapping. So we really do everything from the micro interactions all the way up to the bigger user experience.
Okay, so you've got a big umbrella under
Yeah.
that usability analyst, from
Yes.
interaction design to kind of like the understanding the service journey
Yes.
of how these people, your customers,
Correct.
are they customers that you can call them?
Yeah, so when we do our usability studies, we started out just cold calling local customers and bringing them in-house to do usability studies. Something that we'd wanted to do for a long time that we just recently got to start doing was doing email recruiting. So this is where we can send out a mass email, and then it's really up to the customer to take it, No one wants to answer a cold call. So we've had a lot better success with this approach. So that's something that we've just started doing this year.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What does American Fidelity do, and how do your digital products support the business?
So American Fidelity is a supplemental insurance company. So think like Aflac, where we have disability, cancer. We also do annuities, which is retirement planning. So a lot of regulation within that industry. And so you have to think about that when you start trying to do UX at your company. Think about what the regulations within your industry are and who you maybe need to get support from as you move forward in that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you have individuals who are signing up for supplemental insurance.
Right, through their employer group. So we only offer it through employers.
Okay, so your main interface with your customers is businesses, your B2B.
So our employer groups they have like where they can do billing through our online service center. That's the main functionality that the employer level can do as far as our digital products with them. They have a few other things where they can manage their employees. And then the policyholders, they have much more that they can do where they can look at their annuity balances, they can reallocate, they can file claims online.
Okay.
We introduced a mobile app in 2013 for the policyholder customers. So we have more interactions with our policyholder customers, but the employer group is really where the relationship starts.
The funnel starts, yeah. Okay. Well, maybe you can explain annuities to me someday, because I just don't get
That's like a
what's going
whole
on
conversation all its
Right.
own.
So a really complicated space, though.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and that's a whole other realm of understanding for a lot of these employees to be moving into these different regulations and policies, and what's the best decision for me for my money long term. Yeah,
I'm really trying to simplify those decisions for the users through our digital products, and that's really a big challenge.
Yeah. Do you have a web-based application?
We do, yes. So through our public website, there's a login where they can go behind the login and see things that are specific to them. They can see their balances. They can see what benefits they have through us. If they have an annuity, they'll see their balances there. So,
Gotcha. Okay. So you're working on the web application, and you've got a big umbrella of things that you're managing, and it's a team of.
So our total team is 4. We have 2 usability analysts, myself and Chriselle, who's here today. And then we have 2, my manager, Carrie, who's also here today. And she really is more of the product owner level, so she helps her and our other coworker really help drive through implementation, what we're trying to do based on our research and our findings.
Okay, awesome. Well, gosh, so were you the first usability person?
So I guess technically there were 2 of us that officially got the title at the same time.
Okay.
So Nikki started out, she was my other UXer at the time. She got her HFI certification back in 2008, and she was a developer, just a front-end developer. I don't mean just, but she was not a UXer, she was a front-end developer. And at the time, we were introducing Agile to the company, so that was something at the company level that they were bringing in, and I was part of that initial kind of proof of concept for Agile. And so through that, we kind of met up and started working with each other, and she was pushing UI and UX from the front-end development side, and then I was pushing it more through the product owner Agile side. And after doing that for several years, it was approved for us to have a real title and a real job and a real team. So that was over a couple of year period where we went from just kind of where we already had influence, putting those feelers out there about, when we're building these user stories, maybe we need to think about the user.
Oh, wow.
So that was, and then her, like I said, from the front end design, she was really implementing best practices and things like that. So
Okay. And so you were in more of a product owner role.
I started out as a SME, a subject matter expert, and then I moved into the role of Scrum Master on some of our Agile teams. That wasn't really my day job at the time, but that was what was filling up a lot of my workload at the time. So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. And what was it about the Agile methodology that was interesting to you when you started introducing it?
I think I liked the collaboration, and not all of our teams do it anymore. It really just depends team by team. They each manage that themselves, but we did a lot of co-location at the time, and just having that side by side with your developer and talking through the screens and what was confusing to you as the end user, or just, so I was kind of playing the end user role on some of those projects as well, since I was a subject matter expert. So yeah, I think a lot of it was just the co-location and just the planning process of everyone kind of knowing, like, here's what we're going to do in the next 2 weeks. And just kind of having those iterative sprints.
Okay, and so you were trying to bring a more like teamwork approach to doing.
And I think the company brought in, so they actually brought in an agile coach to introduce that to us. And I think the reason they brought it in is because they saw that we weren't where they wanted to be in our digital space, and they also knew that we weren't getting to market as quickly as they wanted us to. So I think, so that was really at the company level, they brought that in. And I was just lucky enough to get on that first team.
Yeah. Okay, so it was all about speeding things up initially. Yeah. And then, so how did the question of usability start to arise out of that? Like, what kinds of problems were you having even after you'd started doing Agile?
I think, I know one thing that, so as far as, can you re-ask that?
Yeah, so you'd kind of led the charge for getting a different style of working going under the company, and they liked that because you were getting things to market faster. But it sounds like you were kind of peeling back more layers to there's some deeper issues here. And what was it that the business was seeing that made them interested in hearing more from you?
So I think a lot of it, once we actually did have our official usability team, and we were able to start doing a little bit more formal usability testing, as we were reporting out, the expectation really was that we were improving the UI and improving that usability level. There was no expectation that we were going to go deeper into the UX, the entire experience. But what we were doing was every time we were reporting out on those findings, we were mentioning the broader user experience and the inconsistencies that, even though within this screen it works great, it's very usable, but when they go to do a similar function on this other screen over here that a different product owner uses or owns, that's usable too, but the two of them together become confusing. This overarching user experience wasn't where it needed to be. So even though that wasn't the expectation that was put on us, we were reporting out on that when we did our usability studies. And so I think that just making everyone aware, because I think so many companies, we live in our silos, and this person owns that piece of the system, and this person owns that piece of the system. And so until you have someone that's really looking at all of it, sometimes we're not even aware of the inconsistencies in the experiences that we're creating.
Okay, so you were really bringing in kind of for the first time like a bird's eye view of the experience of all these screens and interactions, and not just the moment that you're with those interactions, but what it's like to go through and use the application. Big picture. Yeah. What kinds of experience had you had before you got the usability training that led you to be able to do that?
I think some of it is just being a user of the internet and just seeing your own frustrations as you go through things and maybe can't figure it out. You're like, hey, honey, come look at this with me. Help me figure this out. When you're on your bank account website or whatever you're happening to be doing, I think you just, through your own life experiences, you have your frustrations. And some people just move on and don't worry about it. And, well, that's not me. I was like, no, what can we do about this?
You really wanted your problem solver. Yeah. Nice. So when did you do your first training? Did you do the human factors or the Nielsen-Norman group first?
So I have my HFI certification. I used all of their books and trained up, just kind of did a self-study. But my first Norman Nielsen was in 2011, I think-ish. And they don't offer it anymore, but they had a 3-day boot camp that was amazing. They took you through, let's build a paper prototype, and then turn to the person behind you and do a quick usability study on it. So, and that was before we had done any usability studies in-house at American Fidelity. And so we came back from that training, and within 3 months, we did our first one. We were like, we are gonna just do it now while it's fresh in our minds, and we might mess up, it might not be perfect, but we're just going to do it. And we did, and it was great. And we had great feedback. The project team loved it. And that was actually for filing claims online, which is still a product that's out there today that we actually just did a usability study on again for a new feature that went in. So it's a product that we got in on the ground floor. We actually did usability testing on it before it ever went live.
Oh, wow. What kind of difference do you think that made?
So I know, there had been no design done on it before we did our usability testing that first time. We actually did paper testing on that first usability study for it. So I would imagine that the entire flow of that, it probably would have looked a lot like our paper claim form if we hadn't been involved. Because I've seen that happen before where we already had this existing form, this existing product, let's just make it digital and stick it out there for people to use, which wouldn't have been horrible. But I think it was better the way we did it.
How do you think, like, the way, I wonder if you could just say more about the way you ran that first study?
Yeah. So that first study, like I said, we did a paper prototype. So we worked closely with the developer that had already started working on some of the back end of it. And we sat down with her and just got on some whiteboards and drew some things up. And then got with the product owner and kind of went through it with him and said, does this look like what you're looking for? Are you good with this? And he was like, yeah, go for it. And so from there, we cold called customers, brought them in. And so we had this, and we don't do this setup anymore, but we had this overhead camera so that the paper was on the table and the overhead camera was capturing it, kind of like it would capture a screen, but since it was on paper. And so we would have them use a pen and like click on it, and like whoever was facilitating would like, well, here's the screen you would get if you actually clicked on that. And so it was very, very manual and fun at the same time. And it's like, we explained to them when they came in, it's like, so I'm the computer, and I'm a little bit slower than the computers that you're probably usually used to. But so that was a fun experience, and we've gotten to do some other paper prototyping with usability testing, and it's a fun process to go through. And the feedback that you get is so much richer, I feel like. Sometimes when you put something on a computer screen in front of someone, they feel like you've already put so much time and effort into this process and into this design, whereas when it's a piece of paper, they really feel like they can mark it up and make changes and just be very, very honest in their feedback. Where sometimes users hold back a little bit. They don't want to hurt your feelings. They don't know how involved you were in the design. And so the paper prototyping, usability testing, we had great luck with.
Interesting. So are you still doing?
We don't do it as often, but when we have a newer, like a new feature or a new product, a lot of times we will still do them. I think we did one earlier this year. So yeah, we don't do them often, but we do them.
Okay, so it's kind of reserved.
It just depends on where we're at in the design process. Like I said, if it's a brand new feature, then a lot of times we'll do the paper. But if it's an existing feature and it's already prototyped or it's already in our QA region, then we'll test in that region.
Okay, interesting. So that's a really good go-to tool for new ideas.
And it's quick and easy. I mean, you don't have to have a working interactive prototype. You don't have to have anything developed. It can be drawings that you take copies of. So
interesting. Okay, and so how did you present those findings? Like, what made your presentation of those findings interesting to the company?
I think a lot of what sold the value of those findings was providing the highlight videos. So I mentioned that we had the overhead camera for the paper. We also had a web camera to capture their face and their expressions and their words. And I think just for the developers and the product owners to see their customers struggling through interfaces or struggling through things that they thought, oh, we thought they were going to get that. We thought that was going to be great. And it can be simple things like they don't understand the label. Because within our industry, a lot of the terminology is not common terminology, but us at American Fidelity, we know this terminology so well that sometimes we forget that we're not the user. And so so I think that's the main thing, is just seeing the customers struggling through it or delighting through it. You know, if it's something that it was a big win and, oh, they love this design, it was so easy. I think that would be the main thing, is the highlight videos really drove home the findings.
Yeah.
And it goes back to also, this isn't my opinion, or our team's opinion. This is your customer telling you. This is data.
Right. Right, yeah, I found that too. Like, the more you can make it about not you,
Yes.
and it's about those people on the other end of the application. And yeah, it's kind of interesting. There's those moments where you realize, like, we haven't thought about those people in like weeks or months, like really thought about them. You know, very cool. So as you had this big win with this study, and you had a team going, and you're building some momentum to building out your practices on all this. What is something, like, in that time of growth that you asked for that initially the company wasn't interested in adding, and then eventually you built up the case for and convinced them that you wanted, that they should support it?
Something that, so the process of bringing customers in-house and doing studies is very important and something that we're very passionate about, but at the same time, you don't always have the time frame to be able to fit that into a deadline. And so for us to be able to do remote usability testing was something that we really wanted to do early on in our team, and it just wasn't something that we had the support to do initially. So what we did, so we use usertesting.com today, and it was what we used then as well. But what we did, and I don't even think they offer a pay per use anymore. I think you have to subscribe. But at the time, you could do a pay per use. And so we were able to just we're going to do 10 usability studies, 10 sessions, 10 participants on this one usability study. And it's going to cost like $10 per person. It's super cheap and a super easy way to almost have a proof of concept, and then after that to show the value. And so we do that a lot. A lot of times we'll do iterative testing on usertesting.com to kind of flesh out any issues within the UI, and then we'll put it in front of our customers, bring them in-house, and do more of a formal usability study. Okay. But that was something that took a while for us to convince, and I think because they did offer something that we could do on the cheap and quick, it made it easy for them to say, okay, go try it this once and we'll see how it goes. And it went well. Yeah, and you know, and some of the drawbacks to that were that it wasn't our customers, and so there were concerns within the business of how valid is this data? You know, well, our customers know their products. Those people, they're not our customers. They don't know our products as well as our customers do. So we did have some, back and forth on that a little bit, and over time, some of our customers know their products and some don't. Some of them don't know that there's a physician expense benefit on their disability plan. Some of them do. Every customer is different, and that's that whole thing. You have to account for all of the different user types when you're building out these flows and screens. So we overcame that, and we still get to use user testing today, so that's good.
Woohoo! Yay! Yeah, that's something I really love about doing this research and these studies is you get those assumptions coming out of the woodwork, and people start to articulate them, and you have this structured space to respond to them. Like, oh, our customers know the application already. They don't need any more help. Let's go test that and see if it's true.
Yeah. Again, it's back to that having the data behind it. It's not an opinion. So.
Nice. So, it sounds like you have kind of a scientific mind.
I'll go with that.
So what other tools are you using
So something
now?
that we've started doing, I guess last year, recently anyway, is journey mapping. And so that is more of that full experience of the customer's process from beginning to end. And that is something, so you were talking about assumptions within the business. The first few that we did, and we like to do it this way, is where we would actually have a workshop with our internal colleagues that are subject matter experts, they're stakeholders within that framework or that product. And we would kind of have them help us build out what we think the current journey map is. And so we started calling this our hypothesis map. And so it was hypothesis because it wasn't validated through research yet. But we would do this, and it really gave us a good idea of where we felt our customer journey was. And then we would go do the user research and then it would really highlight where our assumptions were wrong, or where we thought they had a good experience and they didn't, or maybe we thought it was a bad experience and they were like, it's really not that big a deal. It doesn't bother me. So I think having going from that hypothesis map to the data-driven map, the customer journey, really highlighted our gaps in knowledge internally within our industry, within our company. So I felt like that was really something that we've learned a lot from, and we've seen a lot of value, and I think the business has seen a lot of value from that. It's something that actually this year was added to our SDLC as a requirement for anything customer facing. We have to have a journey map.
Oh, wow.
That was so exciting.
Wow.
And so that came from the top, that came from not us. And we were really excited to see that they saw enough value in what we're doing that they were like, yeah, that we have to do that every time.
That's awesome. Good job. What are one or two examples of data points that you had a hypothesis for, and then how did you research and validate or refute it?
So the one that I'm thinking of was in our billing journey map for our employers. We were talking about a lot of our employers mail in. So they might go online to get their bill, but then they'll mail in a paper check. And there were some assumptions about, they're having that certified and they're tracking that check and making sure we sign for it and all of these things. So we actually just sent out a huge survey to all of our employer customers that pay by check only. So we really, targeted these specific users for people that get their bill online but pay by a check. And so we sent a survey out just to them and pretty much just point blank asked them, do you get this certified? How do you mail it? What do you do after you mail it? Mm-hmm. And it was pretty much, after we mail it, we just wait for the next bill.
Oh, okay.
We don't, we assume that you got it. Like, we're not going to worry about it. You'll let us know if it went wrong.
Uh-huh.
So that was one of the things where there was a lot of assumptions on the business side, like, they're being very proactive and making sure that it cleared their bank. No, they're just going to wait for the next bill. They've done their part. They're done. Mm-hmm. So that was one specific example that we did some extra research to determine what the current journey map really was.
Cool. That reminds me of something I was listening to the other day where they were talking about having a respect for the life happening outside of your product. Like, the users have their own world that they live in.
That reminds me, actually, in one of our usability studies, it was one of our first usability studies, like maybe a year or two after we'd started doing them. A customer came in to participate in a usability study, and she had her infant and a carrier next to her. And so the whole time she's sitting here rocking the baby, and it's just like, that's life. Like, we're doing things and we still have life going on. So that was, so it's very true. Their life still goes on around you. They're not just always focused on this one task like they are in a lab. Or even in a lab, they might not be.
And then bring their babies, yeah. Cool. And I remember a couple years ago, you were telling me about an interception testing software that you were trying out. How'd that go?
So that, Ethnio is the tool.
What is interception testing? Yeah.
Interception testing is where you'll have like a pop-up and it'll invite them to do a survey or to participate in some kind of user research. We are using that tool. It's Ethnio, and we love it. It is what we actually use, I mentioned earlier, our email recruiting tool. So we send out our email through Marketing Cloud, and then in that email is a link that will send them to Ethnio, and it takes them through a short screener and then a scheduler at the end, so they can actually pick the time and the date that they would want to do a usability study with us, whether it would be remote, like through a go-to meeting, or whether we were targeting local customers. So we use Ethnio for that, and I love it because it not only makes recruiting really easy, it has incentives built into it. So if we just want to give people Amazon cards at the end of their participation, it's all part of that software, which is really nice. We have not gotten to do a lot of our intercepts yet, though. We're still waiting until we can target more specifically the customers that we're wanting to do research with on those pop-ups. And so we don't always have the level of data that we need to make sure that we're only showing it to the people that need to see it. So we're still having some back and forth on our data side there to make that work the way that we want it to. But it is still something that we are pursuing. So
Cool. And who is what is that, another team, the data side?
Yes, it would be. Yeah.
Okay. And what's it like to work with them? How have you built that relationship?
So I work with most of the developers that would like hit the API and things like that. I don't work with the data side a whole lot. But we are getting more to where as we build new features and products, we start making metrics part of our requirements. So we're doing a better job going forward of making sure that we have that data in the future. But, you know, like everyone, we still have some legacy systems. We still have things that aren't where we want them today. And so sometimes it's just not there.
Yeah, there's kind of this idea of technology being really buttoned up and tidy. And
Yeah.
of course you can track everything that everyone does all the time.
Well, you
know.
can.
Google, maybe lots of companies are doing that, but you know, a lot of the, you know, in-house applications that we're working on, they don't have that. And
Right.
it can be quite a journey to get to the place
Right.
of being able to have that kind of conversation.
But we are doing a much better job as new things are built out of identifying those things up front and making sure that it is built out. But so going forward, we're in a good space, but there's still some work to do on those legacy systems.
And what made that, you know, a priority as you built things going forward?
I think a lot of it was, you know, executives or product owners or anybody would come back and ask us for things, and we're like, well, and then we would go to the team and be like, well, can you pull this data for me? And no, we don't have it. Like, it's not that we don't have that data. It doesn't exist. We're capturing on the screen, but we're not saving it or doing anything with it. So I think it was just, the more and more that we did research and that we went back and asked for these, you know, these metrics and these bigger data points, and we just didn't have it. And then you've got executive teams saying, we're going to be data-driven, and we're going to base our decisions on data. And so there's really a much bigger initiative outside of our team even to be more data-driven. And so that makes it easy for us to say on these smaller projects, like, hey, we need metrics, because it's already being at the higher level saying, we're going to do this.
Awesome. I had like 3 questions come up out of that, or 3 just thoughts of, and I lost it. That's okay. Tori has a question.
Brandie, do you all incorporate any analytics, and if so, how do you use them?
So she asked if we provide, or if we do any click analytics, and what was the second part?
If so, how do you use them?
How do we use them if we do? Click analytics, so we have a tool called MouseFlow that actually captures screens and clicks. It'll even track what it is, like angry clicks, like if there's a bunch of clicks in a row. And so it'll tell us really quickly, like if people have a good or a bad, like it has a red, green, yellow for each of the recordings that it provides. So that one is one that our marketing team and our UX team uses a lot. We are just now getting to the point where we have more click analytics built out, like I was saying a minute ago, into our metrics going forward. So a lot of it we're still using GA, which is great, but we don't always build out anything that's not just part of, you know, out of the box GA. So we use that where we can, but you know, with a lot of our screens aren't actually reloading, it's just reloading those pieces with Angular and things like that. So it's not always a new URL path that I can track in GA. So that's one of the struggles, but some of that is just, like I said, going forward, we're getting more of that, but we still have a lot that we're wanting to get more of. Yeah. Do we do our own surveys, or do we write them ourselves? We do. We have a market research team that we collaborate with a lot on those to make sure that we're not, you know, creating biases or anything that in our wording, but we do them ourselves, and we generally send them out ourselves. And then occasionally we'll get with them and send out a bigger one that has some of their stuff and some of our stuff in it, but we do send our own out. We don't use Monkey Survey. It's not an approved tool at American Fidelity. But we use Optimal Workshop as long as we're not capturing any PII or PHI. And then we use Ethnio for some of our other surveys, which is approved for some of those more specific things. You're welcome.
Security. Sure.
Yeah, how do you deal with the lead time of research to product?
So the question was, how do we deal with lead time for user research to the finished product, especially within an agile environment? So generally, our product owners have a pretty deep backlog that is not going to get even started on development for a bit. And so we're in those stand-ups and we try to stay ahead with the backlog. For instance, we have a new feature that's going to go out, I think, the 1st of October. We did wireframes and usability testing on that in April. So we are just always trying to be aware of what's on their backlog and what is their next priority to make sure that we're a few steps ahead.
How long did it take you to get to that point?
Ooh. So it's 10 years, 6, 7, 8. I'd say 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
And some product teams, some of our teams, it's easier to do than others. Everyone knows with an agile, each team runs a little different. Some have 2-week sprints, some have 3-week sprints. Some try to deliver every sprint. Some deliver every however many sprints.
Wow.
So within we're a pretty big company, and so each of those development teams, they really try to let them determine what works best for that team, which I love that about it. But it does make it where we kind of have to learn to know how each team manages their agile sprints.
Right. That's something that really stands out to me. I remembered my question about your career. Is you've been at American Fidelity and you've been building this department for a long time, and I can really hear in what you're sharing with us that it really is an extended conversation.
Absolutely.
That you're having.
Oh, definitely.
What has kept you going in that?
So I think a few things. When I first started, not at AF, but when I first started trying to pursue this usability UX thing, I had a manager that was very supportive. And even though I was pursuing things that had nothing to do with my current role under her, she got me a mentorship with our software manager, who is now our CIO. So she was very supportive of me pursuing a career path that took me away from her. And so just having that kind of support early on really helped. And then just even as I moved through, several different managers during this time frame, I've had a lot of good support. And American Fidelity is a place where you really are allowed to try things. And I think it's understood that trying sometimes means failing. Mm-hmm. And so it's a good environment for that. We have a good culture for that when it's appropriate. Mm-hmm. But really, a lot of it has to do with the culture of the company that I'm at, and that it is very supportive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. So it really comes down to leadership. You've gotten support from leadership.
It does, and it does take patience too, because as you go through, if you do get moved around or if you have different managers over time, there's a new learning curve and there's a new level of education that has to happen, and can be frustrating, but at the same time it's good because that means now more people know. Now the word's getting out there. Now you're going to have more people rooting for you and rooting for UX. So you just have to take that mindset that this is new to them. You're not just regurgitating the same thing over. You're teaching and you're expanding and you're broadening the scope and the influence that UX has in the company. Mm-hmm. So I think you just have to have that mindset about it when you're doing those things.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Always. We kind of end up in that role of always kind of on the leading edge of different ways of doing things. Right. And conversations, and that's something that UX does, is challenges, entrenched business culture.
Right.
Yeah. What other questions do we have?
Yeah, so we definitely work. So the question was, how do we, when we're working that far ahead of the agile team, how do we validate that we're working on the right? The requirements are solid and everything, right? So we definitely work with the product owner very closely. So back in April when we were doing that, we worked with the product owner over that and made sure that he saw our wireframes, he saw our tasks that we were going to use during usability testing, and he approved all of that before we moved forward. So definitely you have to make sure that you've got the buy-in and the support of your product owner if you're going to work that far ahead. And there's always an understanding that far ahead requirements can change. And we actually did go back and do, a few weeks ago, we actually did another test in our QA region of that same thing that we had wireframed back in April, just to make sure, let's make sure that these few requirements that changed, or if the interface didn't quite look like our wireframe, we're going to make sure that we've done our due diligence and tested what's actually going to go live. Yep. Thanks.
Do you have different stakeholders with different ideas on what a project should be? What were some strategies for coming up with aligning that?
So the question was having different stakeholders with different strategies within one product. Is that what?
This guy thinks it should be this, this guy thinks it should be this.
So just differing opinions on what it should be, what it should look like. That's really, and so we've done, within some of our usability studies, we've done, not like what you think of when you say A/B testing, because that's usually live and you're just testing different colors or something, but we'll do A/B testing of several different prototypes or wireframes. And so then really it's back to the data. It's not your opinion over his opinion and what he said, what she said. It's, this is what tested well, this is what the customers did well with. So I think if you can get both of those tested in front of customers, that's the way to go.
I'm curious to the type of pushback that you saw in establishing UX within the company in terms of selling that as important as design or marketing or development. But do you have any stories that you could share in regards to that, like selling that idea to the higher ups?
So the question was about pushback on UX from within different areas in the company, or just, and
Why are we going to pay for these salaries to bring these people in?
so yeah, but paying for salaries and what's the benefit? Why would we do this? So I will say that early on, before we had an official UX team, which that happened in 2011, I think it was 2010 or 2009, our company did, and I don't know, I'll ask you when I'm done if I answered your question. But we did a big redesign of our public website, and as part of that, had a lot of eyes on it from executives, and they brought in a big consulting team. And that consulting team actually consulted out with Evolve, who is a local market research company, and they did some usability testing. The first that had ever been done at American Fidelity, before, like I said, before we had a UX team. And I think because so many eyes were on that project, I actually got to sit in on a few of the sessions, because that was when I was starting to do a little bit of it, dabble. So I got invited. But I think that sold a lot of our executive teams early on. And so once...
Was it like the organization of it, or just
I think it was just the idea that we needed customers to be involved in our process. I think that's what they saw with what Evolve did, and that made it, they really broke the ground for us. It really paved a way for us to move forward. But certainly when we started, a lot of it was more UI and usability focused. And so to get more into that UX level where we are today, we've moved departments. We started out in IT. We're in our marketing department now. And so we have a lot of support from them to help us get that higher, that broader spectrum of the customer experience. Yeah.
All right, 2 more, because I can't say no.
Oh, go ahead.
Do you have any situations where you're doing testing on an app or a tool or website that is going to be used by groups of people that might have different objectives and outcomes using the same tool? So how do you handle that?
So the question was, do we have situations where different users are using the same tool for different goals and objectives? So with our employer and employee customers, they use the same tool, but once they log in, it's really not the same tool at all. So I'm trying to think if we have, I'm looking at you, Chriselle, to see if you can think of anything. We really segment it by the user audience once they log in. I'm sure that exists out there, but I will say that if you have that, you would just want to make sure that, like, if you're doing a usability study, you would want to recruit evenly, like you would do 6 recruitments for each of those user types, and their task would be specific to their goals and objectives. So if we did have that, that's how I would approach that from a usability study standpoint. Right. That's a good question. We've done both. So the question was, when you're doing A/B testing within like a usability study environment, do you use the same customer to test all of them, or do you use different? We've done both. And this is something that every time we do these, I have to go back and look at my notes from NNG, because in our measuring class, there was something about these, making sure that you don't create biases. And so this last one that we did, we actually showed them 3 different designs. We showed all of the customers all 3 designs. We changed the order of which design they saw to help with some of those biases. So I would just say it depends on your study and what you're testing. But definitely make sure that if you're going to do that, make sure that you do your research on making sure that you are avoiding biases, that they're getting the exact same task wording on all of the designs. And if you are using the same customer, make sure that you change up the order of which design they're seeing first.
Awesome. Really great questions, you all. Thanks so much for coming out and having good thoughts. And please introduce yourself, say hi afterward, and let's give Brandie a big thank you.
I just want to say thanks real quick for having me out here. I'm very new to this community, and you all have been very welcoming. And this was a great opportunity to be up here. And so hopefully y'all will see more of me.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Yay.
Few other announcements really quick before you go. If you guys have